Donald Trump is an intergalactic loser. Not just a regular loser, but an intergalactic loser. He's not a loser because he lost the 2020 election, but he's an intergalactic loser because he refuses to accept it. He keeps coming up with all these ways to claim fraud in our past elections, particularly the 2020 election, and last night was no different. I know this because I was actually on the committee when the Trump lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani, came before Georgia lawmakers to try to convince us to throw out our elections and give Trump the presidency in the 2020 election. At that time, his lawyers were claiming that there was fraud in the absentee balloting process and that was the reason of how that he had lost and how could he have lost this election. And there were a few of us who stood up to them and told them that what they were saying was completely ridiculous. In fact, I wouldn't even call what they presented to our committee as evidence, because the moment you ask any questions about it, you could see where it completely just fell through. I attacked the attorneys on the fact that Republicans in Georgia never had a problem with absentee voting when it was mostly older white people using the process. In fact, they had expanded absentee voting, which is where you fill out your ballot at home and then you mail it in because you're not going to vote on the day of. Georgia Republicans had actually expanded absentee voting when they saw that a lot of older white people were using it. So they had previously expanded it. But the moment that Black and brown voters used it in 2020, that was the moment that all of a sudden absentee voting became fraudulent. Some of the other things they tried to claim was that there were people who were voting with addresses that were registered to abandoned buildings, which B. Wynn, my seatmate, another Democrat on the committee, completely knocked down that evidence. See, none of this was actual evidence, but knocked down that evidence by letting them know and understand that some of the addresses they listed, she actually knew the people who lived in those houses, and some of those people were her constituents, and they absolutely lived in those places, and they were not abandoned buildings. One by one, their evidence was knocked down by committee members, and people just knew that there was absolutely nothing to the fraud claims. In fact, I don't even know why Donnie keeps talking about this election, because it really has the potential to get very embarrassing for him. Republicans did not even think that there was fraud in the election. I didn't find not one Georgia Republican who actually believed that the election had been fraudulent. What I did see and hear was the moment that Trump said, hey, we needed to have a committee meeting and that Georgia needed to call a meeting and try to investigate the election. What I did see was Republicans left and right grumbling about having to waste their time on trying to litigate something that they knew did not happen. The chair of the committee at the time, who was a Republican, he told at least one Democrat that he didn't even want to have the committee meeting. But he basically knew that if he didn't go along with this, that they would just remove him as committee chair. So none of the Republicans on the committee thought that there was fraud in our election. And someone who is in Republican leadership told me directly to my face, I don't know why my voters, our voters, meaning the Republican Party, I don't know why our voters are saying there was fraud on the machines when we actually won on the machines. Yeah, so I know how you hate disloyalty, Donnie, but he really should just move on and stop talking about this election and just accept that he lost the 2020 election.